What would you do if the one moment of passion you've longed for your entire life came from the person you least expected? Emily was a loyal wife, a caring mother, and lived a quiet life in suburbia, until Jack moved in next door. In a single glance, everything changed, and what began as innocent curiosity spiraled into a devastating affair. But secrets have a way of coming to light, and the consequences? They're darker than you could imagine. Emily, wife of David, 35-year-old stay-at-home mom. Married for 10 years to David. Once full of life and energy, she now feels trapped in a routine existence. She craves excitement, passion, and attention, things that her marriage no longer provides. David, Emily's hard-working husband. In his early 40s, David is a dedicated provider, spending long hours at his corporate job. Though he loves his family, he has grown emotionally distant from Emily, oblivious to her emotional needs. Jack, the new neighbour, a ruggedly handsome man in his early 40s. Charming and charismatic, Jack is a bit of a mystery, recently divorced and living alone. He notices Emily in a way that David hasn't for years, and his flirtatious manner pulls her into a dangerous game. The children, Emily and David's two young kids, innocent bystanders caught in the middle of their parents' crumbling marriage. They represent the stakes Emily risks losing as her affair unfolds. It all started innocently enough. Emily never thought she would be the kind of woman to have an affair. She had been married to David for 10 years, had two beautiful children, and lived a quiet suburban life. On the outside, everything seemed perfect, but inside, Emily felt a growing emptiness. David, her once attentive husband, had become distant over the years. His long hours at work and constant preoccupation with providing for the family left Emily feeling neglected and invisible. It was on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Emily was outside watering her garden when she first really noticed Jack, the new neighbour who had moved in a few months prior. He was tall, ruggedly handsome, and had an air of confidence that David no longer carried. Jack was working on his car in the driveway, shirtless, his skin glistening in the sun. Emily couldn't help but stare for a moment too long. As if sensing her gaze, Jack looked up and smiled. That smile, it was warm, inviting, and held a hint of something more. The next day, Emily found herself lingering outside again, hoping to catch a glimpse of Jack. Sure enough, he was there, this time walking his dog. He waved and she waved back. It was a small gesture, but it made her heart race in a way it hadn't in years. "You've got a beautiful garden," Jack called out as he approached the fence that separated their yards. "Thank you," Emily replied, her voice shaky with nerves. She wasn't used to feeling nervous around men, especially not her neighbour. They talked for a while, about the neighbourhood, the weather, even gardening tips. But there was something in the way Jack looked at her, something that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. He was attentive, listening intently to everything she said, unlike David, who barely seemed to notice her anymore. As the weeks passed, their conversations became more frequent, more personal. Jack started complimenting her, her smile, her laugh, the way she carried herself. Emily felt alive again, as if she were rediscovering a part of herself she had lost over the years. One afternoon, when David was at work and the kids were at school, Jack invited her over for coffee. It seemed innocent enough, just two neighbours having a friendly chat. But when Emily walked into Jack's house, she felt the electricity in the air. She knew deep down that this wasn't just a casual visit. They sat close on the couch, talking and laughing, but the tension between them was undeniable. Jack's hand brushed against hers, and instead of pulling away, Emily let it linger. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and before she knew it, Jack leaned in and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, as if he were waiting for her to pull back. But she didn't. She kissed him back, with a passion she hadn't felt in years. From that moment on, there was no turning back. What started as a harmless attraction quickly spiraled into a full-blown affair. Emily and Jack found ways to be together whenever they could. Stolen moments when David was at work, quick encounters when the kids were at school. Each time they met, the excitement grew, and the guilt faded further into the background. But secrets have a way of coming to light. One night, Emily was lying in bed next to David, her mind replaying the day's encounter with Jack. She hadn't realized how distant she had become with David, how much she had pulled away. He was still the same man she had married, but something had shifted between them, and it wasn't just about Jack. It was about the growing chasm between them, the unspoken words, the unmet needs. "Emily," David's voice broke the silence. She turned to him, startled. He hadn't spoken to her like this in months. "I feel like I don't know you anymore," he said, his voice heavy with sadness. "What's going on?" Her heart sank. David wasn't a fool. He had noticed the change in her, the way she had been pulling away, the way her mind seemed to be elsewhere. Emily wanted to tell him, to confess everything, but the words caught in her throat. "I'm just tired," she whispered. "It's been a lot with the kids, the house, everything." David nodded, but the hurt in his eyes was unmistakable. He didn't push her, didn't ask any more questions, but Emily knew it was only a matter of time before he discovered the truth. The affair continued for weeks, but the weight of the secret began to crush Emily. Every time she saw David with the kids, every time he kissed her goodnight, the guilt gnawed at her. She loved him, she truly did, but her need for Jack was overpowering. Then, one afternoon, everything came crashing down. David had left work early, something he rarely did. He wanted to surprise Emily, to take her out for a spontaneous lunch date like they used to. But when he pulled into the driveway, he noticed something strange. Jack's car parked outside their house. A sinking feeling washed over him as he quietly walked through the front door. The house was eerily quiet, too quiet. And then he heard it. Laughter, Emily's laughter, coming from upstairs. David's heart raced as he crept up the stairs, his mind refusing to believe what he already knew. As he reached the bedroom door, he paused, his hand trembling on the knob. Slowly he pushed the door open, and there, in the bed they had shared for years, was Emily, with Jack. The world seemed to stop in that moment. Time froze as the reality of the betrayal sank in. Emily's eyes met David's, and the color drained from her face. Jack scrambled to get dressed, stammering apologies that fell on deaf ears. David didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked out of the house, the sound of the door slamming behind him echoing in the silence. That night, David packed his bags and left, taking the kids with him. Emily was left alone. The house that once felt warm and full of love now felt cold and empty. Jack didn't come around anymore. The thrill of the affair had vanished, leaving only regret and heartbreak in its wake. Emily had lost everything: her husband, her family, and the man she thought she wanted. In the end, the affair that had made her feel alive had destroyed everything she held dear. Now, all she had were the memories of a love that had crumbled, and the haunting realization that some desires, once fed, can consume you whole.